It's just the habit. That's all it is. You have no idea what you're capable of until you just set these habits of industry, really is what it is. And then you kind of have a deep sense of not wasting time. The founders are obsessed with this. George Washington has clocks everywhere. John Quincy Adams is always beating himself up for wasting time. He says, if only I had a little more self-discipline, I might have ended war and slavery. He sets a very high bar for himself. And you don't do that. But, if I have a morning where I've written a song, it's, first of all, the whole day is vindicated. Even if I make a hash of the rest of the day, I've created something.
Welcome to A Life Worth Working, a podcast about how we get to the soul of work.
We're your hosts, Dana Allen Walsh and Michelle Weise. Michelle is an education and workforce strategist, and I'm the senior pastor of a progressive church.
And as always, we love hearing your comments, questions, and thoughts. So please know you can email us at any time at hello@alifeworthworking.com. In this episode, we chat with Jeffrey Rosen, the president of the National Constitution Center. Jeffrey also serves as a professor at George Washington University Law School and as a contributing editor at The Atlantic. And he's also the author of several books, including his recent work on the Founding Fathers' understanding of the pursuit of happiness.
Jeffrey shared with us that there was a moment in college when he had a strong sense of calling without understanding exactly how he was supposed to fulfill it.
I was an English major, English and government, studied the Puritans and their efforts to achieve moral perfection. And it was really in college that I had some understanding or a calling to bring together English and government, literature and history, and liberals and conservatives. And I don't know where that came from, but it was very powerful. I remember a moment I was in the college library when I kind of received that understanding. I didn't know how it would play out. I went to law school after 2 years of grad school in England at Oxford because I didn't know what else to do. I loved to read and loved to study history and just wanted some more time to figure it out. And in law school, I decided I didn't want to be a practicing lawyer. I thought I wouldn't be good at it and wouldn't like it, that it wouldn't be meaningful. And decided in law school to become a journalist based on a summer internship I had at the New Republic magazine, which was the most exciting work I'd ever done. My mom was not happy about this decision, to put it mildly. And it did require taking a risk, a leap, doing something that most people weren't doing when I was in law school. And it proved to be a good risk because soon after I finished, while I was clerking, the editor of the New Republic magazine, Andrew Sullivan, asked me to be the legal affairs editor. At the age of 28, it was a huge break at a time when the New Republic magazine was a big deal. There was no internet and there weren't a lot of venues to write about the law from the point of view of the ideas and constitutional arguments. And that tremendous break led to a very meaningful, satisfying career in journalism. After a few years, I decided to teach law, both because I loved it and I thought it'd be a steady base for writing. And I started teaching at GW Law School, where I still teach. And then after 20 years of very fulfilling work as a legal journalist and law professor, the National Constitution Center called out of the blue and took a flyer on me. I'd never run an organization and they'd never had a law professor before. But it proved to be an extraordinary break and synergy and synchronicity because that mission that I had experienced so long ago, bringing together liberals and conservatives for thoughtful dialogue about the Constitution, proved to be literally the National Constitution Center's mission statement.
I've really enjoyed what you've written around the founders' pursuit of happiness and this understanding of virtue rather than pleasure, and also your connection to personal self-mastery as necessary for democratic citizenship. And I'm curious about how you see that connection today around character development and civic participation, especially when we live in such a time of immediate gratification and convenience rather than a time of self-restraint.
It's so true that in many ways we seem to be living in the antithesis of a world of self-mastery and character development, and are struggling to attain the founders' wisdom that political self-government requires personal self-government, that we really can't function productively as citizens in a democracy unless we first tend to the constitution of our own souls. And it was so illuminating for me to see James Madison draw an analogy between the constitution of the soul and the constitution of the state and say that in both we have to achieve moderation, prudence, courage, and justice, the classical virtues, so that we can resist our unreasonable passions and emotions and achieve that calm tranquility that defines well-being and flourishing. There are so many aspects of modern life that conspire against this classical and Enlightenment vision, in particular social media, which is so polarizing and puts us in filter bubbles and echo chambers and makes it difficult to converge around a common version of the truth. We're in trouble by taking our opinions and our cues and our news from partisan and polarized sources that reinforce our most extreme impulses and encourage us to be ruled by passion rather than reason. We are finding it difficult to achieve the founders' ideal.
Let's talk a little bit more about this idea of self-government, because I think most listeners won't necessarily know what we're talking about. And I think you have some wonderful stories also about our founders and their notions of self-government. And you yourself have tried to engage in some of these practices of self-government. So let's talk about that briefly.
So by self-government, founders meant self-improvement, character improvement, using your powers of reason to master your unreasonable passions and emotions. There's this chart at the end of Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics that I can never remember, but it's helpful. There are a series of emotions or passions, and for each one there's an excess and deficiency. So we're seeking not exuberance or despondency, but moderation. And by finding the golden mean between passions and emotions, we can avoid unproductive emotions like anger, jealousy, and fear, and cultivate productive ones like prudence, temperance, courage, and justice that allow us to fulfill our potential, be our best self, and serve others. So I was following Thomas Jefferson's reading list. He has this absolutely extraordinary reading list, which he would give to anyone who asked when he was old. And the reading list is amazing, both because of the range of the books, which include literature and political philosophy and ancient history and science. And he was very big on poetry and Shakespeare, but also the schedule. You have to get up every morning before dawn, read moral philosophy for 2 hours, watch the sunrise, then keep reading for 12 hours a day, essentially. So I tried not the whole schedule. I only did the pre-breakfast version of it, but I did get up every morning before dawn, read moral philosophy for an hour or two, watched the sunrise, found myself writing these really odd sonnets just to sum up the wisdom that I learned, and then I'd get on with the day. For me, the takeaway was to get me back into the habit of deep reading. And for the founders, it's all about habits. And by engaging in this really unusual project during COVID of getting up every morning, spending 2 hours reading moral philosophy, watching the sunrise, writing these weird sonnets, I found myself invigorated by the thrill of learning every day. And it's just so stretching and expanding to read every day the way I used to in college and now do. And it gets you out of your head. You can't, worry about the latest political news or something at work that's bothering you. You have to learn and grow. And being a lifelong learner really is the definition of the pursuit of happiness.
I think a lot about that intention of starting the day in a creative way. And when I take out my phone, I'm in a reactionary mode, right? Like I immediately start by reacting to email, reacting to social media, which is a different way of being than being in a creative space. But I'm curious because I feel like a lot of people want to do these things. And the self-discipline is what is the challenge.
That's so true. And first, I have to say, I love your distinction between a reactive and a creative mode. That's really the definition of productivity and virtue. You're expressing your best self when you're creative, and you're reacting to things you can't control when you're reactive. It's so true.
Right.
I got some self-discipline with my wonderful Jewish mom. And it turns out that, John Quincy Adams had a Puritan mom, which is even more challenging in some ways. But my mom created a model, an example of the importance of reading and music and working hard in order to succeed academically. So I developed those habits, which were good for doing well in school and as a kid, like many of the founders who got it from their reading. But what I hadn't internalized as a kid was the transformative power of working not to do well in school, but just for its own sake, to do well in life, to just broaden your horizons and to connect to something larger than yourself. So that was why it was so important to rediscover those youthful habits of reading, not for anything instrumental, but for its own sake. That was the crucial thing.
Jeffrey is one of those rare public intellectuals who doesn't just study ideas, he embodies them.
He's practicing what he studies, the founder's commitment to lifelong learning, self-improvement, and engagement with ideas that transcend the immediate moment.
And there's a joy to it that's important to recognize. This isn't just about discipline for discipline's sake. It's about creating space for experiences like watching the sunrise or writing songs, things that connect us to something larger than ourselves and bring genuine fulfillment. And I'm curious, in your study of the founders' virtues, what virtues would you say would help connect people in the modern workplace and make work more meaningful, more fulfilling as you think about that connection to virtue?
The one virtue that the founders almost uniformly practiced until the end of their lives was industry. Because as kids, they developed these habits. They all were readers. They read the classical moral philosophy. Some read it in universities. Others were self-taught. But just that daily habit of reading and writing, they kept up until the end of their lives. I think it's so inspiring that John Adams and Thomas Jefferson, as old men, after having fought a revolution, fallen out over politics and reconciled, just want to talk about the books they've read. And they're such deep readers and they're trading book ideas. So in the workplace today, of course, not everyone works with books or is engaged in that kind of employment. But for the founders, as for the ancients, the most important time of the day was leisure. Louis Brandeis, one of my heroes, who's actually behind me on the wall, he was so excited to learn that the Greek word for leisure was unemployment. He said, what a happy land that, where, leisure is unemployment, a scholai. But for Brandeis and for the Greeks and for the founders, leisure or unemployment wasn't a time to work less. It was a time to work more at self-cultivation, at self-mastery, at learning and growing about topics outside of your immediate employment. Brandeis was so excited that the Jewish garment workers he represented during a strike at the turn of the 19th century, at the turn of the 20th century, would use their breaks from the strike negotiations to read Tolstoy. And he said, that's the model. So we do live in a world where we have the extraordinary luxury of being able to use our leisure time to learn and read and grow. That Brandeisian notion of leisure emphasizes that it's the moments outside of work that we're most likely to find our purpose, but we have to create it. And I know so many people who are not satisfied by their jobs, but there are so many meaningful leisure activities like deep reading or deep listening that we can engage in outside of work. And that's also what the classical ideal is, that we work for breadwinning so that we'll have more leisure time to learn outside of work, that work is not, it's a new notion that work is where we're supposed to find meaning. Cicero looks forward to retirement as a time away from politics when he can engage in his deepest philosophizing and when he writes the Tusculan Disputations after the death of his daughter. So maybe we're really just asking too much of work to have that be the primary source of meaning. And through rigorous time management and self-mastery, we can find that fulfillment outside of it.
Yeah. So, Jeffrey, I am curious to explore with you this notion of calling or vocation for yourself and how you saw it in the founders as well and what their understanding of calling and vocation is. When I think about it, just so you understand kind of how I'm approaching it, because for some people as a pastor, you might be thinking that there's a certain lens in which I'm viewing it as there's this burning bush moment and then we follow that calling clearly the rest of our lives. But I often think of calling as something that we form through our daily choices and through our ongoing engagement with the world. And so it's not something that comes to us as fully formed, but it's something that we actually discover and live into. So I'm curious about how you saw that in the founders and how you see a sense of calling in your own life.
That's a great question. I remember from my college studies of the Puritans how central calling was to them. And the idea that there was a divine calling that we could discover and be given and not choose that would best allow us to serve our divine purpose. And that Puritan junction led to huge anxiety among the heirs of the Puritans, in particular Henry Adams, who I studied as a kid and is constantly griping about the fact that 20th century America is not giving him the deference that he thinks he's entitled to as an Adams. And he's wondering what his calling is in an American democracy that is abandoning the old hierarchies and embracing technology ahead of schedule. And as a kid, I also wondered what my calling was, and there is this anxiety about wondering, how can I best fulfill my potentials? How can I succeed? And what am I supposed to do with my life? It does develop organically. It did for me. And looking back, it's such a blessing that it all kind of built on itself. And just by following the calling of doing work that I found really meaningful and could completely lose myself in and work really hard, I'm able to culminate in this just astonishing opportunity to be part of the National Constitution Center, which is calling for all of us, because the mission is so much bigger than we are. And it's just so meaningful to be a platform for civil dialogue, debate, education. We're really all learning together along with the Americans who are hungry for this kind of civility. So it can't be planned, I found. I had that, I guess it's totally weird to think about it, but I felt like I did have a calling back in the college library, but I didn't know how I was supposed to fulfill it. And the way it turns out I was supposed to fulfill it was just by working hard and losing myself in the work at every stage and doing it as well as I could. And eventually you come to do it not to succeed or for recognition, but for its own sake. And you realize that the work is the path. That is all there is. That is the pursuit of happiness. It is virtue. It is reason. It's just why we get up every day, is to learn and grow more so we can be a small part of this miraculous universe we're living in and hopefully contribute to it in some kind of productive way.
It's interesting that you use the term lose yourself, because I'm wondering, when you do get super immersed in something, are you in like a flow state?
Yes, I think so. You completely lose yourself and you can't be distracted. When I'm reading or writing, I'm just completely lost in the task. There's a great example from Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who is the most focused, virtuous, self-mastered person I've ever had the honor of knowing, was having a birthday in her chambers, and she's doing her briefs and reading at her desk, and clerks come in to celebrate her birthday, and over 10 minutes, the room is full and everyone is there. And then suddenly she just looks up in surprise because she hasn't noticed that anyone else has come into the room, because she's totally focused on the path. And you just know it when you see it, that kind of incredible flow state and focus. She exemplified it better than anyone.
That's a great story. The thing I'm wondering, Jeffrey, is, have you always been curious? Because it seems like you take curiosity to a whole different level.
No, not at all. That's a great question. I guess I always was. And it absolutely came from my mom. My mom was so full of curiosity and interest and enthusiasm that as a kid, I remember saying, "You're interested in everything. When I grow up, I'm going to be interested in nothing." She was so full of enthusiasm. She's this larger-than-life character. It's wonderful. Let's go outside and look at nature. And she was a bird watcher, and she could name every flower and mushroom. And she loved music. And every day was an opportunity to go and learn something and create something. It was just great. And it was definitely irritating as a kid, but I'm so grateful for that example. And I since learned, Ken Burns shared with me recently, that the Greek word enthusiasmos means the light within. That means to have the divine light. And I think that enthusiasm is if I've got any, it's enthusiasm, which I got from my mom. And it just it gets you outside of yourself and inspires you to want to learn something every day.
I love that.
I love that too. I love that connection to your mom. Ideally, we would all decide carefully what warrants our attention, which people, ideas, objects, or projects have meaning and value for us. Jeffrey's story reminds us that this isn't just a nice idea. It's a practice we can cultivate daily.
And it connects directly to the question at the heart of our podcast: what makes a life worth working? Jeffrey suggests that it's not just what we produce or achieve, but how we direct our attention and whether we're creating or merely reacting.
It's fascinating to think that the founders' emphasis on virtuous citizenship might be precisely what we need in an age where algorithms increasingly shape our environment and our decision-making. Madison's analogy between the constitution of the soul and the constitution of the state feels eerily relevant to our digital age.
When Jeffrey talks about character development, he's reminding us to take stock of the human skills that distinguish us from machines in an age of AI. What Jeffrey suggests is that character skills like courage, prudence, moderation, justice represent an enduring human domain that machines can't replicate. However, at the moment, we're being shaped and molded by those filter bubbles and echo chambers in which we are stuck. But our uniquely human capacity for creative character may be our most valuable asset. Our ability to start before we're ready, to create rather than consume, to show up with character on our hardest days. These are what make us irreplaceable in an automated world.
In a world increasingly shaped by AI and algorithms designed to capture and monetize our attention, choosing how we focus our minds becomes not just a personal preference, but a profound act of self-determination. The question isn't whether we'll react to life today. Of course we will. The question is whether we'll make the countercultural choice to create something new in the midst of it all.
A life worth working, indeed. She's Dana Walsh.
And she's Michelle Weise.
This has been another episode of A Life Worth Working. Don't forget to subscribe and share with your friends and loved ones who may also be searching for purpose and meaning in their work lives, or what we call the soul of work.